I'm Femi OK, and you're in The Stream. Today, it's not a news story, but it's one that continues to astound. Why is maternal health in the United States so bad? We'll take a look at the statistics, the stories behind the numbers, and the work that some are tirelessly doing to reverse the trend.
I'm Malika Bilal, and this conversation is live on YouTube, where we welcome your questions and your comments for our guests. Well, this is a show we've had a lot of feedback on already, with people wanting to share their stories. So here are just a couple.
I knew the statistics of Black women and our maternal health. I knew of the stories of Black women dying in childbirth, and it freaked me out when I became pregnant because I did not want to be a statistic. I went to every appointment with lots of questions. I would ask everything I wanted to know, and it didn't matter because 5 weeks before my due date, my daughter decided to arrive early. My birth plan was out the window. So I asked all the questions again in the hospital. I found her doctor. I would make notes because I knew that literally her life depended on my questions. Thankfully, we left the NICU a week after her birth, and we're here healthy and happy 18 months later.
I had a difficult pregnancy where I didn't feel like myself at all, and I wasn't sure what was going on, but I knew that it had to be something. I later found out that I was suffering from congestive heart failure. This made me realize how important it is for Black women to have quality health insurance, to ensure proper medical care prior to pregnancy, to potentially save lives.
There's a lot to talk about today, and with us on set, BRIANA Green is the Director of Operations and a perinatal community health worker at MAMATOTO Village in Washington, D.C. MAMATOTO is a nonprofit organization that creates career pathways for women of color in public health and provides accessible perinatal support services. In Las Vegas, Nevada, Dr. JOIA CREAR-PERRY is founder and president of the National Birth Equity Collaborative. She's also co-founder of Black Mamas Matter and an obstetrician gynecologist. And in Atlanta, Georgia, Charles Johnson IV is an improved maternal health advocate and founder of For Kira for Moms. His wife, Kira Johnson, passed away in 2016.
Hello, everybody. It's good to have you here. Thank you so much for making the time. I want to take you back to 2 years ago in April, and that's when Kira and Charles were in the hospital and baby Langston had just been born, and there was so much joy and happiness in the hospital. Have a look.
I'm going to go do the next case and then take the test. If it's still low, then I'll come back and help you. But 97 like quadruple graph.
Hey, Langston. I've been waiting on you, buddy. Everybody's here to celebrate. Golly. I gotta say, looks like it's Peppy.
That is one handsome baby. So that would have happened 3 years ago, this coming April. Charles, what happened next?
Well, thank you so much. And that video still puts a smile on my face. That was one of the happiest moments of our lives. And it quickly turned into a nightmare. So shortly after Langston was delivered by routine cesarean section, they took us back to recovery. And as I'm in there soaking up all the pride of becoming a father for the second time, Langston is just relaxing in what I like to call it the toaster or the incubator. And Kira is resting. I look down and I see the catheter from Kira's bedside begin to fill with blood. I brought it to the attention of the doctors and the staff at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, and they came in, they ran tests, including a blood work and a CT scan that was supposed to be performed stat. And long story short, that they allowed Kira's condition to deteriorate and for her to suffer for almost 10 hours before they finally took Kira back to surgery. My family and I advocated, we begged, we pleaded with the staff at Cedars-Sinai for them to take action. And they kept on telling us, well, we'll just wait. And finally, when they did take her back to surgery, when they finally opened her up, there were 3.5 liters of blood in her abdomen. And Kira's heart stopped immediately, and there was nothing they could do to save her.
Nothing they could do to save her. Doctor, what do you make of that?
You know, I've listened to Charles and I've been together a few times, and every time I hear his story, I'm always saddened, but also I really appreciate the advocacy that he's doing. I really The waiting for so long is a failure of our healthcare system in general to listen to mothers, to listen to fathers. As Charles mentioned, he brought it to their attention right away. We find this over and over again from Serena Williams to others that a lot of times our patients, our family members are not listened to, they're not heard, and they're not valued. And so we really have to work as a community and as a country to think about why is that? Why don't we listen to and believe in what our patients and our family members are saying?
And this, BRIANA, this occurred at Cedars-Sinai, which is a major, hospital system in Los Angeles, California, here in the U.S. So keeping that in mind, I wanted to bring up two perspectives here. This is Nayamu, who says that these stories remind this person that the element of class and affordability contribute a big deal to this imbalance we're seeing. But he almost immediately got some pushback from someone who wrote in. This is Sarah on Twitter, who says, a Black woman with a PhD has a higher chance of dying during pregnancy, childbirth, or postpartum than a white woman who didn't graduate high school. This disparity is not due to poverty or being more unhealthy. It's an inequity due to racism and discrimination on many levels. Who are we talking about here? Is there a certain type of person? Is there a certain circumstance that they're in? What does that look like?
I mean, when we're talking about these disparities with Black mothers, yes, okay, income, socioeconomic status, they play a role, but it's secondary because at the end of the day, Black moms who are educated have the same outcomes as moms who are not or have lower socioeconomic status. So we're really looking at the structural issues that are repeated in all of these stories. And all of these situations have similar backgrounds that end up impacting it. So at the end of the day, we have to address the racism. It's inherent within the system, and that's what is the bottom line of it. There's no other, when we're balancing out all the other factors, that's the bottom line.
Mm-hmm. So structural issues.
Would you mind if I add something?
Yeah, go, Charles, please.
Would you mind if I add something to what
please.
BRIANA said? Is absolutely, I think BRIANA hit it directly on the head, is when we look at CREAR's case, unfortunately there is what I feel is a very false narrative associated with women that are dying in childbirth, is that there seems to be somewhat of a victim blaming. She must not have had access to care. She must have had complications. The baby must have been in distress. She must have been in a community hospital. And all of these mothers, regardless of their socioeconomic status or background, are precious. But the thing about CREAR's story is she defies every single one of those narratives. She was exceptionally healthy. She was diligent about her prenatal care. She was supposed to be one of the best hospitals, not only in the country, but the world. And it still didn't matter because she was failed to be seen and valued as human.
Charles, so when we talk about, or when BRIANA says structural issues, or Doctor, you can jump in here because you're a doctor, so you know in terms of what the maternity care is like in the US. Structural issues, is that code for racism?
Yeah, and I think it's important for us to really unpack, because when we say the term racism, people think of it as an emotion or a moral judgment, or as if someone's calling someone a bad name. And people do call people bad names, and that does happen. But when we are thinking about racism, we have a history and a legacy in the United States and across the globe of valuing people based upon their skin color in a hierarchy. So we have a hierarchy of human value based upon skin color. So that's codified in not only our policies, big P, like laws and procedures, but even how we interact and how we treat people. And so it's why you see a disparity or an inequity when it comes to maternal mortality of 3 to 4 times the rate, or in some places 8 times or 12 times. It's not because Black women are not getting care or not showing up. It's because when they show up and they do receive the care, despite all these other barriers around access and income, they are not seen as fully valuable or fully human. So the steps that you would take to acknowledge someone's bleeding or acknowledge someone's pain, we have data to show that those steps are not taken.
Right. And to that point, it's not the mother's job to take care of herself or advocate for herself in a way that her provider should inherently be doing. So it's not the mom's fault. They're being blamed, as Charles said, for things that are not their responsibility. They should be going into these institutions and expecting that they're going to be receiving care that is of the utmost integrity and respect, as any human would come into a hospital.
BRIANA, I want to share the story of Fantasia Graham because it really emphasizes how horrific lack of care can be when you're having a baby. Fantasia Graham is in a National Geographic spread. And in the National Geographic spread, they're looking at maternal deaths and babies' deaths in the US and why they're so high. This is Fantasia's story. Have a listen, have a look.
I was in and out the hospital. I was like sick, like dying sick. And like they just ignored me. It's like, you know, when I checked in, you know, they're like, okay, go back home. Everything is fine. And I knew like deep down in my heart, everything was not fine because my body was just giving up, like in so much pain. I was at my grandma's house and, you know, getting ready for school. I just saw like blood and I knew that something was wrong. And I told my grandmother and she was like, go to the hospital like now. When I got there, they did an ultrasound and they told me that they didn't hear a heartbeat.
BRIANA, she knew something was wrong. She knew her own body. Then what happened?
She knew something was wrong, and I went with her several times to the hospital on those visits that she's saying she was sent back home. And she was articulating to them something is not right. And not being a medical provider, she couldn't say exactly what wasn't right, but she knew something wasn't correct. And every day she was sent back. And we went probably about 4 or 5 times that I went with her personally. So when she lost that baby at that visit, she was actually alone when she went to that visit. And she sat in that hospital waiting room for about 3 to 4 hours before someone actually called me to come and be with her. And once I arrived there, we sat for another several hours before someone even actually came out and spoke to her about what her next steps were going to be.
Can you explain what those next steps were? I will never forget what the next steps were.
So we went back to speak to the doctor, and the doctor told her, it was the day before Thanksgiving, so they said you can either deliver your baby today.
And the baby is?
The baby had been deceased.
The baby has died inside of her?
Yes.
Okay, so these are the options.
This baby, you can deliver this baby today by induction, or if you want to go home and have Thanksgiving tomorrow, you can come back after the weekend. And when they told her that, she literally was dumbfounded. Why would you ask me something like that? It just felt so heartless. It didn't really take into consideration what she was feeling at that time, and she was devastated, and then that just added to her devastation. So we did go in, and she had that baby that same night.
So tough to hear, and of course, even tougher to have to live through. Our community is weighing in on that as well. One person just wrote on YouTube. Stan says they see our color and then they do not see us as human beings. So it's that idea of being dehumanized here. But I wanted to push on just a little bit to try to explain this from a medical perspective. We got a video comment from the twin doctors, and full disclosure, one of those doctors is my brother-in-law, and they sent a video about why they think this is. Have a listen.
So I think a big part of the problem of poor prenatal care and postnatal care for Black and brown women has to do with the fact that we don't have universal health care. We need universal health care to provide that care. I think the second issue is a social safety net. We don't have the social safety net that allows people to get to the doctor. If you don't have a way to get to the doctor, if you don't have someone to watch your children, having health insurance isn't going to do anything.
Now, access to care is certainly an issue for minorities, but another issue is the fact that minorities are typically cared for by the majority, and so you have issues of implicit bias. And so what happens oftentimes with implicit bias is majority healthcare providers, when they look at minorities, don't relate to them like they would relate to their mom, their sister, their brother, their neighbor, and so oftentimes they're caught kind of flat-footed when there is an emergency that's developing, and oftentimes they don't recognize that there's an emergency that needs to be addressed until it becomes an urgent, life-threatening situation.
So doctor, when we talk about implicit bias, you're in the medical field. When did you realize that this was a problem? Did you learn it in school?
Oh, no. I tell the story when I was in school, and it wasn't in my mind that long ago, in the late 1990s, early 2000s. I was taught that there were 3 races: Mongoloid, Caucasoid, Negroid. So we still live in this country where we've been teaching the genetic basis of race to our physicians. So that allows them to continue to believe in a hierarchy of human value, because that's what we've been taught. So really, we completed the Human Genome Project in 2003, and yet still, we still have a lot of medical providers who still think of races as genetic. That means that when we say things like disparities, when they hear those words, what they hear is, of course, you're going to fare worse because you're genetically inferior. And that history of eugenics, that history of not believing that we're the same, is embedded in how we provide care and embedded, and it's not just implicit bias, it's explicit. So I want to be clear, people are treated not just based upon a feeling, but they actively, sometimes are harmful because they explicitly believe that we are different. So that is both implicit and explicit.
And in what way different, Doctor?
The difference meaning that we are not genetically the same. That blackness in and of itself, our skin is thicker, we don't feel pain in the same way, we must have higher rates of, I'm sure you get comments, we get higher rates of hypertension, we have higher rates of diabetes because there's something innately broken about us. And the same, if we are all genetically the same, then the thing that is harming us is the thing that we're living inside of in this country. When people come from Africa, from the continent to the U.S., they have better birth outcomes than African Americans or Black people who've lived here for generations. Because once you've been here and living inside of this system that treats us differently based upon our skin color, you have the health impacts of that.
BRIANA, go ahead.
Oh, no. I mean, it just resonated with me what she was saying as far as the, the outcomes of women who are living in this country who would expect to be able to have the benefits of being in America, and yet and still, African American women who have been here their entire lives are having horrible disparities compared to people who are coming here and immigrating here.
Yeah, and just
so there's this idea here that I wanted to bring up based on what both of you are saying, and I wanted to give this to you, Charles. EPCAT writes in that there's a lack of Black doctors, doctors' disbelief of what their Black patients tell them. Blacks get less pain medication than whites. The healthcare system itself, the maternal care desert in Southeast DC, not too far away from us here in the studio, all contribute to the statistics. Healthcare is racist in the US, so this is one person's view there. But Charles, I wanted to pick up on this idea of the disbelieving of what Black patients tell them, because I know that that can then be internalized and then not wanting to seem pushy or like we know more than the doctor when we're trying to talk about a problem. Talk to us about your thoughts on that and what it felt like to know there was something wrong and not feel like you could speak up.
Absolutely. And I'm so appreciative that you guys brought this topic up, because I'll be transparent. One of the things that haunts me is I stay up at night thinking to myself, what could I have done and what should I have done differently? And I ask myself, well, maybe if I had been more vocal, maybe if I had been more avid, maybe if I had grabbed the doctor by the collar, maybe if I had raised my voice, maybe if I had made a scene, maybe my wife would be here today. But when I was in the moment and I was at the hospital advocating for my wife, my thought was, as a Black man, I have to remain calm, because if I'm seen as a threat and I get removed from the hospital, who's going to be here advocating for my wife? And that really haunts me, to be honest with you. And it's a difficult thing to think about. If I was Caucasian, I probably would have felt that I had the latitude to make a scene on my wife's behalf. And that's tough.
But you are advocating now, and I think that's really important, because we have spent a big chunk of this discussion talking about the issues and the problems, but you also know the solutions. BRIANA, you are one of the solutions. Explain.
So I work for MAMATOTO Village, which is an organization that is working with at-risk, primarily women of color, primarily Black women. We are located in Ward 7 of DC, which, for those who are not local, is one of the most at-risk areas in DC. And so what we're doing is we're really on the ground trying to make changes within our community by providing not just maternity support, but we're also accessing the entire families, supporting these families, and identifying that the fact that a lot of our moms are having poor outcomes is not just solely based on their physical pregnancy, but also the other factors that impact their lives: food insecurity, homelessness, mental health issues, environmental stresses. And so at MAMATOTO, we train our workers to really address the whole woman, all of those issues that are affecting her, in order to give her a better outcome.
I'm looking here at one of the posts from MAMATOTO, and you're looking here about building your home visitation skills. So you're giving people that agency in order to be able to help other women who are expecting.
Absolutely, and a lot of the women who are in our program who are working with these mothers were actually served as mothers prior to coming to our program. And that's part of the beauty of this program. It's not just accessing, people who are not accessible to this community or familiar with the community, but also bring people out of the community to come back and serve. So it's a co-creation of services.
Jenny here agrees that your work matters. Jenny says midwives can mitigate the inherent risks of birthing while Black and bearing the disproportionate burden of risk during pregnancy, birth, and postpartum. And another member of our community here brings up the Black Mamas Matter organization, Dr. JOIA. Monica says community engagement and participatory work is essential. See the holistic care of these organizations she listed here. Talk to us about that holistic care.
Yeah, we at the Black Mamas Matter Alliance created, along with, there were midwives, doulas, and OBGYNs who created a paper, we call it the Black Paper. And it's really holistic care for Black mothers and what it could look like. And it's uplifting places like MAMATOTO Village, which was a part of the paper, as well as in DC, the birth center there is the F2HC led by midwife Ebony Marcel that has a birth center inside of a F2HC. So think about having access to a birth center with a midwife in a community that's usually marginalized. It's important for us to have spaces that value, and like Jenny Joseph in the JJ way, and looking at having this comprehensive care that allows, there's no wrong door. People access care with her. It doesn't matter their income or their insurance status. And so to build on the Dr. Twins earlier, that we have a country that doesn't have full access to health care. Also, we don't have paid leave. We don't have paternity care. The countries that have better outcomes have all those things. So not only are Black women dying in this country, white women are dying too, because we don't have access to all the social safety net things that a country as wealthy as we are should have, and we use racism as an excuse not to invest in human beings.
Charles, I remember you very clearly saying that it haunts you that maybe you didn't do enough, but now your advocacy is impacting so many more women. For CREAR for Mums is right here on my laptop. Can you explain what it is that you're advocating for and how you're doing it?
Absolutely. So this is an organization that we created to pay tribute to CREAR, but not only CREAR, the tens of thousands of women that are impacted and have been impacted by this crisis. And so we're doing a couple things. First and foremost, working diligently with the help of programs like yours to raise the awareness. Unfortunately, this has been America's dirty little secret, that we have this crisis going on. In addition, that we're working towards legislation and policy reform that will make America a better, safer place for mothers and babies. And lastly, working in cooperation to create programs that will better serve all families, but particularly mothers of color. And one of the things I want to just say, and I have to say, is that people like, but specifically BRIANA and Dr. JOIA, are my sheroes, right? And what you heard from them is talk about a lot of the expertise that organizations like MAMATOTO bring to the table, and that Black Mamas Matter Alliance bring to the table. But one of the things that I want to be clear that they bring to the table that's missing is they bring compassion. And whether or not it's Serena Williams, whether or not it's Kira Dixon, the thing across the board that we're finding is that somebody did not listen to these women, and they didn't bring a level of compassion that is sorely lacking in our country. And so for that, I'm grateful.
Legislation, we'd be remiss in this conversation without talking about legislation that passed not too long ago, Preventing Maternal Deaths Act of 2018. You can see it on my screen here. Not very pretty, but it happened. Doctor, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, it was great. We've been trying to get a bill passed for 10 years. It's been 10 years, since 2010, I apologize. But we've been trying to get a bill just to count the number of deaths in the United States. We have not been accurately counting the maternal deaths, and that's why you'll see a range 700 to 900, which is another dirty little secret of the United States. And so this bill allows for us to invest in counting maternal deaths and then really having robust interviews with family members and others to see what really happened. If you just look and saw that Kira unfortunately died from hemorrhage after a C-section, that doesn't tell you the story. Listening to Charles talk about his wife, listening to Charles talk about the fact that what he felt in that moment, and we know that they count the number of Black people that could be in a delivery room when they're having a baby versus the number of medical students and residents that could be in a room when a person is having a baby. It's important that we build that out. So that's what this bill allows us to do.
Thank you, Doctor, so much, and BRIANA, and also Charles, for sharing such a personal, painful story. We really appreciate you being on the stream today. Malika?
The ending sentiment is this, that we've seen several times from people online. Basong says, it's difficult to understand that this is happening in the USA.
Thank you, everybody, again. You should look up for CREAR for Moms online. Also look at our stream.aljazeera.com page for more details about all the organisations that may be able to help you if you want to make an improved version of maternal health. Thanks for watching, everybody. Take care.